Welcome. Thank you so much for giving us your time today. I'm really excited to show you this game or activity and for you all to play along. So it's meant to be a group activity, but I don't want to mess around with I think going into breakout rooms and back and forth will take up too much time. So you're going to kind of play solo, but imagine that in your classroom, you're going to play in groups. Please unmute yourself anytime you want to chat. Please answer questions, ask questions, whatever you need to do. I'm happy to answer it. I'll kind of walk you through. The game is kind of set up and it has some kind of unique things to the slides. And so we'll kind of take a pause after we've played a little bit, and then we will kind of show you some of the like technology side of it, and then we'll get back to playing. So, sound good? I see some people oh, Jennifer saw you on Saturday. I love that. All right. So I'm Dr. Jamie Wagner. I'm an associate professor of economics, and then I direct the Center for Economic Education at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. It is currently, well, we're just at the end of a blizzard, but yesterday was 75 and the most beautiful day, and today is a blizzard and there's no school. And tomorrow we'll be back to 50. Midwest is fun. I saw somebody from Iowa, so I wonder if you're in the same situation. I'm also a professor and teaching fellow with the Foundation for Teaching Economics. I am on sabbatical this year, and so my project was to work for the Foundation for Teaching Economics, writing this entrepreneurship curriculum, and I'm super excited. There's my email if you want to get a hold of me, jfwagner@unomaha.edu, and then you can follow me on Instagram, connect with me there as well. So please feel free to, you're not interrupting, please feel free to ask questions as we go. Okay, so these are the classroom rules. We'll slightly adjust them, but the idea is that you own a food truck and have to make business decisions which will earn or lose you money. And then sometimes life happens. So when I was thinking about this game, I wanted to play it a little bit like the game of life. If you all remember that game, do we remember that game, Life? Perfect. We just got our kids playing that, so they're really excited about that. They're 8 and 5, and the 1-year-old doesn't play, but she just kind of watches. But sometimes life happens, which can also earn or lose you money. So you're gonna work in real life or in your classroom, you'd work in groups of 2 to 3 students, and they'd follow along with this packet. I'm going to give you the link to the packet that you can see it. It's in your chat right now. However, I think it's going to be cumbersome to do the packet just with drawing the supply and demand graph. So I would encourage you just to draw things on a scratch piece of paper, like literally a Post-it note, a napkin, a receipt from, I mean, if you have a CVS receipt, you've got like miles of paper to write on. So you've got plenty of paper there if you've been to CVS recently. And then you're going to also need to keep track of how much money you have because this is a game of life and we want to see who ends up winning. So just kind of keep track of it. That one might be easy to keep track of on the packet. Any questions? Any questions? Are we ready to play? I want to be like that sort of thing. Yes. Game of life, like Wheel of Fortune or whatever. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, normally we would roll a dice, but what I'm going to have you do is you're going to write a number between 1 and 6 in the chat, or you can write on your piece of paper. You're just going to kind of pick a number between 1 and 6. Like you're rolling a dice. Love it. Lots of numbers, lots of numbers. Oh, sorry. All right. So you're going to roll a dice. This is going to see what kind of food truck you are starting. So the number will correspond to a type of food. Sorry, I just hit exit and I didn't want to. If you rolled a 1, you'd be tacos, 2 donuts, 3 burgers, 4 sandwiches, 5 waffles, and 6 pizza. So make sure you know what you are rolling. Trishanda, this is the slide with which you have. So you just need to roll 1 through 6. And honestly, for the point of this webinar, it's okay if you want to just make up which number you have. So burgers. All right. So stop. right? The game of life. Remember, if you've done that, there'll be points where you have to stop and you have to choose a career. You have to stop and, do all those sort of things. What I need you to do, and if you've accessed the document on the website, there's a little cute truck that you draw the title on, and if you can, you get some markers and you market it and things like that. Really fun things to do for your entrepreneurship students. But I need you to name your food truck, and then you don't have to color and draw on your sheet. And then I want you to create a menu of 2 items. Now, with those 2 items, the more creative and detailed you are, you can earn yourself $10 in profit. So go ahead, I'm gonna give you a minute. Name your food truck. And then I'm gonna, if you would be so willing to share what you named it and some menu items, I would love to hear that. So name your food truck and come up with some items. The whole, as you're naming it, the whole idea of thinking through this is that students have to understand supply and demand and how that affects entrepreneurship, but they need to do some creative things as well. So they're going to be doing some creative things throughout this whole thing. Ooh, David goes waffles on wheels. World of waffles. Taco-rific. Oh, I love this. Birds be free. All right. Anyone? Donuts go nuts. I love this. This is somebody, Sal Sammy's. 515 burgers. All right. Can anyone, would they be willing to unmute themselves and share just one of your creative items? You can tell us like what food truck it is and if you want to share your name, but then just one item. So somebody unmute themselves.
Oh, I can do it.
Thank you.
I'm from Eastern Europe, from Romania, so I said Transylvania delicacies. So I was thinking, because it's a big attraction, with Dracula Castle and everything, because I'm from Romania, so I was thinking Eastern European food.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else want to share one of their creative menu items?
I will.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer.
Okay, my food truck is Genwiches instead of sandwiches.
Genwiches, I love it.
Yeah. And so I said 2 pancakes with syrup and bacon and eggs on it, and so that's a sandwich.
Oh, there we go. That's a fun breakfast sandwich. I love that. That's such a fun idea. All right, so I am not going to police you because I don't know where you are. So if you felt that you were creative enough, you can add $10 to your log. So this is where you're keeping track of your profits, things like that. You might want to walk around your class and check out how creative your students are getting. But that's for you to kind of check out. All right, so activity 2. And each of the sheets of the Google Doc that I sent you, that supply and demand kind of packet, is going to walk you through each activity. And the great thing about kind of how this works is that each activity is semi-independent of the other activities. So I designed this to work in about a 60-minute class, but if you only have 45 minutes, you can cut off kind of the last activity. Or if you want to tweak it, you can do that sort of thing. So you can kind of customize it a little bit. So you kind of flip to the next page of, when are you open for business? So you have to decide when you are open for business. You can pick one of those 5 options. So you can be open for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, for breakfast and lunch and dinner. And then you'll want to explain maybe briefly why that makes sense for your food truck. And I hear dinner 100% because I'm not a morning person. All right. I need the afternoon for prep time. See, that makes sense. What else? What else are you planning to be open for? Lunch. Lots of people are open for lunch. Breakfast, lunch only, lunch. All right. Lunch and dinner. Okay, some are lunch and dinner, some in lunch or dinner. All right. So you should have picked, and you can write down 1 through 5. That's fine. Again, we're going to kind of play along, and you're just going to kind of on your honor system. So you parked for the day in a business park with many working folks. This is great for your business at lunch. If you decided you're open at lunch, So it had to be either lunch or breakfast and lunch or lunch and dinner. If you chose one of those three options, you get to add $10 to your team profit, to your profit. So if you chose only breakfast or only dinner, you don't get $10. Oh, because that's the game of life, right? When I did this at a conference, and somebody every time there was something bad that happens, which I guess there will be, everyone goes like, wah wah. So if you were not open at lunch, wah wah. However, there are ways. So life happens, right? You didn't have any. You maybe it doesn't make sense for you to be open at lunch, but there's ways for you to earn money by answering supply and demand questions correctly. So I want you to use a supply and demand graph to explain how parking in a business park for lunch could help kind of a business, not necessarily your business, but I want you to draw a supply and demand graph and make sure you label all the axes, the lines, and show what is happening in the market for food. Now, if you chose not to be open for lunch, that's fine, but think about if you think about what would happen to a business or to a food truck that would be open at lunchtime, parking near a business park. So draw a supply and demand graph. Draw a supply and demand graph. And I'm going to give you the start of a supply and demand graph. So you should have something that looks kind of like this. And then you need to determine what's happening. So you're parking at that business park, right? There's lots of businesses. You're open for lunch. What is this going to do for your business? Or for a business, especially if you didn't pick lunch. Would anyone like to unmute themselves and share what they think is going to happen using supply and demand? Rightward shift. So you should have something like this. Woo! All right, so parking in a business park would increase the demand for the food in your food truck. If this persists, you would see an increase in the quantity of food you would sell and an increase in the price that you'd be able to charge. So this is what's really great. There would be an increase in demand for your food. So life happens, but you can also earn money for getting things correct. So $10 to your food log or to your profit log if you've got that correct. Okay. All right. So the romaine lettuce that you may have came in contact with salmonella, a food poisoning bacteria that can make many people extremely sick. Wah, wah. If you make tacos, burgers, or sandwiches, you need to deduct $10 from your profit because life happens. So deduct $10 if you happen to be a taco, a burger, or a sandwich food truck. Now, for those waffles, right? Waffles, donuts, they have never done me wrong, right? Salmonella, lettuce, all that stuff is always, catching, always getting salmonella, always causing problems. All right, so this is activity 3. I want you to use a supply and demand graph to explain how lettuce possibly being contaminated with salmonella could affect businesses. So even if you are not necessarily one of those food trucks, what would that do to your business? So keep in mind that people know romaine lettuce is one of your food ingredients. Go. So what would happen? What would happen? So you'd have a supply and demand graph that looks like this. Matthew, why would there be a ooh, it's not, so I will say there's no double shifts because we're trying to keep things simple, right? We're just kind of get these simplistic ideas. The other thing to keep in mind is that each activity is essentially independent of every other activity. So I know in the real world, we would have parked by a business park, then we would have had salmonella, and all these things would compound, right? And there's lots of different things. But the whole idea with this is that we want to just make sure that they're practicing supply and demand shifts, okay? All right, Varun, do you want to unmute yourself and share why you think you would decrease in demand?
So I took the approach, it's either a decrease in demand if nobody wants your lettuce or your sandwiches, I'm a sandwich shop. Or I said you could also have a decrease in supply if this increases the price of the lettuce that's available.
Maybe. It's only going to shift one, so which one?
I'll go with demand first. My first instinct, decrease in
So
demand.
remember, so I tried to kind of go through where it's, what are people going to do? How are people going to react that they know this is happening? spoiler alert, we'll talk about the supply side in a moment, right? So people are going to be hesitant to buy food from your food truck. Has this happened to restaurants? I feel like every year there's a salmonella outbreak, right? People really get hesitant about getting burgers. I think Chipotle has a salmonella outbreak all the time. Yes, Danny, Chipotle all the time. And so ultimately this is going to decrease the price and quantity for your food. So $10 if you got that correct. Woo!
Quick question.
Yes.
And I realize we can always sort of modify these things,
Yes.
but what would you think if we said, all right, $10 if you did the demand shift, $5 if you did the supply shift, since technically they could both be argued?
So when this
Could
is
we sort
talking
of give
about
like
it,
a partial credit to the kids? Or do
I
you
would not.
recommend no? Okay.
I would not, because to me, this is clear. This is a demand shift, right? We're going to talk
Okay.
about a supply shift in a moment, but remember, how is this going to affect your business? Keep in mind, people know that romaine lettuce is one of your food truck's ingredients. So how are people going to respond, right? So that's why you want to
Okay.
really focus on that, because here we go. So you don't know this, but some spoiler alert. So suppose romaine lettuce is an integral part of your business and your food truck. If there's contamination, the lettuce has to be thrown out, and suppliers to your food truck will also have to dispose of it. You cannot wash the bacteria off. I always have students, right? Can I just wash it? No, that is not how this works. It gets thrown away. So now, right, Aaron, when you're thinking about this, this is going to affect a different side of it, because now this is affecting your input costs. So you've gotten a little bit of head start on this. So use a supply and demand graph to explain how this salmonella contamination in your in your supply chain could affect your food truck business. So now draw a supply and demand graph. So very clearly this is, the supply side. You're going to have something that looks like this. I keep seeing supply shift to the left. And it'll go like this. Throwing out or discarding the contaminated or even potentially contaminated lettuce is going to reduce the supply of that item. So it's not even just, when businesses have to do this, you don't really know which lettuce is contaminated or not, right? You kind of just have to throw it all out. It could have been contaminated. And so this is going to make it hard for you to provide your items, and the supply of your food would decrease, which would decrease the quantity, increase the price of your food. It's going to be much more expensive. So $10 if you got this correct. And I haven't been there. I don't take away points for getting things wrong. It's just meant to be like if you get it wrong, it's just no points. And you all can decide how you're gonna police this in your own classrooms, classroom management. I've done it where I will have them have to show like a neighbor group, whatever works in your classroom, works for me, right? So this is where you need to be creative, because this is where the business works out. This stuff happens on a regular basis where something happens in your supply chain. So brainstorm in your groups. So this would be you thinking on your own. Oh, some realistic, you don't have to do 3 just for the sake of time, but some realistic ways that you could handle this salmonella outbreak with your food truck. What would you do? So what would you do if you owned a food truck? Salmonella outbreak. People are hesitant to buy your food. You have to throw it out, which is hurting your supply, hurting your profits. What can you do? So whether you sell sandwiches or the tacos, just think about what you would do if you owned a business that was affected by this.
Do you want somebody to jump in and give you an idea?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I have the taco truck, and
Okay.
so even though I have chosen dinner and lunch, I guess I could shift to breakfast tacos. Although I guess with the current price of eggs, that wouldn't be a good thing. But due to the salmonella outbreak with the lettuce, shifting my product to a morning product where I'm not using any kind of vegetable like that could
Yeah. There's no lettuce in those breakfast tacos. That sounds
no.
awful. Nobody has suggested that one. I like that idea a lot. Anyone else want to share cabbage instead? Run a sale. No lettuce madness week. Buy a hamburger and mention you hate the lettuce is $2 off. I love that. That's hilarious. Substitute with another input. Somebody was going to say something?
Yeah, I was thinking, how's about, shifting the menu, whatever you have lunch, breakfast, to something that you know is less likely to have any outbreaks.
There you go. Yeah, so you switch the lettuce completely.
Anything, like any international, I bet there, I mean, a lot of dishes that not necessarily have a lot of, lettuce. So when you know, you can, spinach has some, those outbreaks, right? Lettuce. So something that you have to kind of, you can count on that resource, right? Less likely to have any unpleasant situation.
So what's going to be the long term? Ooh, get a free chocolate chip cookie. That's funny. Yeah, spinach does have recalls. I don't know if I often hear of spinach and romaine seeming to get they like must team up and get salmonella at the opposite times. They say, maybe there's some sort of collusion that we don't know about in the lettuce industry. I'm totally joking. Right? So here are some ideas, okay? Some ideas. So maybe you swap for another type of lettuce, right? That's not contaminated. I've heard a couple people say that, right? Maybe you have spinach, maybe you change to cabbage, things like that. Maybe you stop making the item that needs the lettuce for a while. Okay, you pull that from your menu. I think that this happens kind of frequently. It's happened before, right? Make the food item, but don't use that type of lettuce. I feel like that's Chipotle's motto is whenever there's a salmonella outbreak, they're like, well, you can get a burrito bowl or you can get your burrito. There's no lettuce here. They don't even get spinach in. They just, for that time, they're just done, right? Maybe you find a new supplier with lettuce that's not contaminated. I think I saw that a couple times. So for what I would say is $5 for each realistic answer, and that's your choice. The one thing I will say to do with this one, or to make sure you keep in mind, is you need to be able to do something right now, right? You can't say like, we're going to grow all new romaine lettuce, because that's a year in advance, right? Or 2 years or whatever it is to kind of do that. So you need to make sure that your students are thinking about, what can I do right now? And that's really, I think, important to entrepreneurs, is that they get this wrench in their plan, right? It messes up their supply chain. It messes up their supply and demand of their food truck, and they've got to fix something. So all right, so we are going to take a quick pause, and I want to show you a little bit about the slides. So I don't know if you've noticed, I'm not sure how it works in Zoom, but I have been clicking on, can you see my mouse? I don't know if you can see my mouth on Zoom. Oh, okay. So I don't know if you've been seeing this, but I've actually been clicking on parts of the card. So what this is that it's going to send you to a completely new slide. You can't just keep clicking through it. And it's meant to do a bit more interactive. And then to get back, you close out of it right here. So I've given some instructions, and I'm going to come back to this in a second, is that there's some, and these instructions are in the lesson, they're also in the slides for you, is that there's certain parts where you want to interact with the cards, and you click on the back side, and that's going to send you over to that slide with it. So it shoots from slide 2 to slide 42. And then there's some cards that don't have that, so you would just click as you normally would. And then on the back sides of the cards that they look, maybe in my mind, they truly look like the backside of a playing card or the backside of a board game card. You can click through the animation like you would on a slide deck, and then you would click on this X to kind of get out of there. So that is kind of my intention with this. So you can see that, and you'll get these slides, well, not these slides, because these have like some extra things. You'll get a set of slides that you can use that have all these animations on there. So you can see that all the cards are all right here. And then towards the end is all the answers. They send you back and forth. And they're all editable for you to use. Any questions while I'm kind of trying to find my spot? Questions. Does anyone have a touch screen in their classroom? Anyone have like a smart board that they touch? So I did this in a classroom where they had a touch screen whiteboard, and that was super cool because when you touched on that part of the card, or you touched on the X, or you touched on the back side, it truly felt more interactive to me. I kind of was like, oh, I'm like, Vanna White pushing the buttons. So that's kind of how it was designed to, or how I kind of played with it to do that. And so you can do that where you can do the interaction there. So hopefully that's fun. I thought it was more fun. So back to the game from this commercial break. So competition can affect businesses' profits. As similar businesses enter or exit the market, that affects your choices. So we're going to roll the dice to see how competition is going to affect your business. So either on your piece of paper, write 1 through 6, or in the chat group, give out write the number 1 through 6. And I saw somebody say give out money coupons when they earn points. I love that. I think that's a great idea. If you want to use classroom currency, classroom bucks, absolutely use that. I think that's a spectacular thing to do. The more fun you have, that's where I'm at. All right. So has everyone picked a number? So again, I'm clicking on this back side, and that's going to send me to slide. Honestly, I don't even know, like 850. I have no idea. Okay, so how was your business affected, and did you gain or lose profits? So if you chose a 1 or rolled a 1, there was no change. So you don't gain or lose anything. If there was number 2, there was several competitive food trucks went out of business, so you got $30 more in profit. And you can read the remaining ones on there. So write down or keep track of your profit based on that. So make sure you're writing down that. Anyone keeping track? How much money do you have? Shout it out. 45. See 45. I see 50. See, 55, 60, 80. Amanda's got an 80. Waffles and a $40 loss. Oh no. You hated waffles too, didn't you, Alina? You said you waffles.
I did. I hated waffles, and now I have $40 loss.
Oh no, this is like the worst game. But this kind of happens in that game, isn't it? Like, don't you feel like you spin that game and you spin the wheel and you end up like, why would I even buy a yacht? I'm a police officer. I make $30,000 a year. Like, I feel like that's how that works out in that game. This is where you flip over the board. Yes, I love that. Yeah. Okay, so here is, we need a supply and demand graph. So use a supply and demand graph. Okay, so this one, every one of yours is going to be different depending on what you rolled. So it's important that you know what you rolled and what changed with your competition. If you need me to go back, I'm happy to do that. Or just make up, it's fine. Use a supply and demand graph to explain how the change in competition would affect the market and your food truck. So you need to use the supply and demand graph and the number or scenario that you previously rolled. So because you all rolled different numbers and because there was a different change for them, they're going to be a little bit different. So I'm going to go back to that card. Typically on the workbook that you're working through, the students would have written down what happened. They would have marked it down, and that's okay if you didn't. So I'm going to go back here. So you need to draw a supply and demand graph for what is going to happen. So if you rolled a 3, show a supply and demand graph with 1 new competitive food truck. Okay. If you rolled a 4, what does your supply and demand graph when there's no change? If you rolled a 5, what happens when there's several new competitive food trucks? Okay. So what's going to happen? Questions on this? This one's a little bit trickier because you all have different scenarios, and your students will have different scenarios, obviously, too. Questions? Okay, does anyone want to shout out typo? And oh yeah, there's a typo. Thank you. Unless you do have a food truck. There you go. Gross, right? So can somebody want to share what number or what they chose and then what they think is going to happen to their supply and demand graph? You can unmute yourself and share. Share, putting this in chat. Allison had supply increases. Allison, which number did you roll?
3. And I
A
got
3.
one additional competitor.
One new competitor. So which way you said supply increases?
Well, in the food truck market, I guess,
Yep.
with all the food, yeah, supply shifts to the right and the price goes down.
So competition affects the supply of the product, right? It's one of those determinants of supply where it's the number of suppliers. And so if there was a large increase in competition, that would increase the supply of the product quite a bit, a large rightward shift. If there was a small decrease in competition, that would decrease the supply of the product, a small leftward shift, right? So there's going to be a small, oh, I just clicked it, sorry. And so you're going to click on this exit to see graphs. And so if you rolled, I think it was like a 1 or a 4, you should have something that looks like this. There's no change. It just is a supply and demand graph. If you had a decrease, a small decrease in competition, you'd have a small shift. And if you had a large decrease in competition, you'd have a large shift, right? If you have an increase in competition, you'd have or small one, you'd have a small shift to the right and a large shift to the right. So I always tell my students to exaggerate it, right? A small one and an exaggerated. And this is for you to kind of, again, monitor with your students. And so again, $10 if you got that correct. Questions on this one? This one's kind of, I think this is one of the trickier ones. I'm not sure if you've noticed, but I've been trying to, as we go through these games, we're pointing out different determinants of demand and determinants of supply that I think are going to most affect a business. And I think that these are fun ways to just, if you teach a regular old econ class or whatnot, this would be a fun way to review supply and demand. But I think for businesses and for entrepreneurship classes, this is a great way to explain how economic concepts and the market changing really affects you. If you are a business owner, you have to know what's happening and you have to understand how these things are coming at your business. So, questions on this? Any questions? Are you having fun? Even Alina, hopefully with her waffles and whatnot. My family we're a big waffle eating family. And so for birthdays, we do waffle and ice cream as their birthday dinner. So then I don't have to do birthday desserts. So I love waffles. All right, so we're getting spicy here. The U.S. grows sugar mostly in the southern region. However, to keep up with demand, the U.S. imports large quantities from many countries. The largest import of sugar comes from Mexico, and this one actually is true, right? This is due to trade agreements like USMCA. The U.S. has now instituted heavy tariffs, making sugar extremely expensive to import. I will say I wrote this in like October, November. So weird, right? If your food truck relies heavily on sugar, if you are donuts or waffles, oh, Alina, you have been the most affected. Deduct $20 from your profit. Wah, wah, wah.
Hey, this is Danny. I have a quick
Danny.
question.
Yeah.
Have you combined, so I teach macro and micro. Have you combined micro cost curves with this at all? This specific question?
I have
And
not.
kind of, or like throwing in the tariffs graph or anything?
No, so all this is going to do is, spoiler alert, it's going to change your supply curve, right? It's going to make your business more expensive to do that. So you're not going to be able to produce as much. Your supply is going to decrease. So it's not really focusing on the cost curve of like an average total cost curve. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So, I
Yeah.
mean, like obviously the supply curve moves left, but I was just wondering if you ever improv this and have them do like an off the cuff average total cost shift or something like that.
So I will say this is the brand new curriculum. It's like not even out there. And so I don't see why you couldn't expand upon this. And I'll show you the outline of the entire curriculum that's kind of in the process right now. And so this would come right as you're talking about, prices and where prices come from and things like that, right? This is the review of supply and demand. However, I think it's a really amazing thing and it's a really useful thing pedagogically to then come back to it later on. So if you do this and then you want to use this example in a week or two when you're talking about cost curves and doing things like that, bring it, like, come back to this. I think that's absolutely something that you should do, and pedagogically a really great thing. This particular lesson doesn't focus on that. I am a big have you ever, KISS, like keep it simple, silly, right? We're keeping it simple. We're just focusing on supply and demand for this lesson, but there's absolutely ways to do that. The other thing is these slides are editable, or the scenarios are editable. And if you want to borrow part of these scenarios for a later lesson, by all means, do it. I don't have a problem with that. You will get these slides today. So you all are the first teachers to get this. So, ooh, right? We should get like a badge or something with it. Right. Okay. So, okay. Use a supply and demand graph to explain how the tariffs can affect businesses in the US that rely on sugar as part of their supply chain. So how is this going to affect businesses? And I gave it away, but we'll just click through it really quick. I feel like Dr. Seuss with Fox and Socks. So the tariffs make business more expensive, even though Mexico will be paying the tariff technically, right? They're writing the check for it. The added cost gets passed on to US businesses and actually US consumers, because the businesses will be paying more for this stuff, and the way they're going to recoup those costs is they're going to raise the prices. If you rely heavily on sugar in your supply chains, your costs will rise, which will decrease the amount of goods you can produce, decrease supply, and ultimately the price of your good will increase. So $10 if you got that one correct. So again, I don't know if you've seen this or noticing, but I'm clicking up at the X. So previously, to get the animation, you can just click anywhere on the slide, or kind of, if you have like a clicker, you can progress the slide on its own. But then to get back to where you need to be, you got to click this X. Otherwise, I'm going to show you where you'll end up. You'll end up here, which is not where you want to be, right? Who knows what that is? Okay. And oh yeah, and Gary, you are correct that it could impact more than donuts and waffle, as sugar is used in a variety of ways. Absolutely. This is more so meant to be kind of a way to right, like I got the lettuce people, the people who rely on the lettuce. Now I'm going to get the sugar, right? It was meant to be kind of stylized and silly, but you're right. And I think that that's a really important thing to do. And you could expand this again. You could ask, what would you do if you were heavily reliant on sugar? What are you going to do? Well, maybe you start looking at the sugar alternatives. Maybe you're looking at honey, right? Maybe your food truck goes out of business because you cannot function anymore, right? That would be, Danny, when you're thinking about those average total cost curves. If your costs rise too much, you might shut down in the short run. And in the long run, you might exit, right? Those sort of things might happen. And I think that it lends itself to have those conversations. It's just not kind of with here. Your burger buns are sugar-free and without corn syrup. So everybody go to Dave's food truck, because that sounds very healthy. But I do hear he has romaine lettuce, so I don't know. All right. Oh no, a recession hits. The economy is struggling. There's also rising unemployment. All food trucks deduct $15 from your profits. Wah, wah, wah. Use a supply and demand graph and draw what will happen to your business due to this recession. So what is happening to businesses when there's a recession? Pizza is recession proof, Matthew. I agree. Pizza is my favorite. I just made pizza tonight too for dinner. So people are losing their jobs, right? They're losing their jobs. So maybe they're not going to that business park anymore because they don't work at that business park anymore. People lose their jobs. They're going to cut their budget. They're eating out, right? I don't know if anyone ever back in the day used to be a waiter or waitress. You knew when the recessions, you knew when the economy was kind of fluctuating before any expert kind of did, because people would tighten up their budgets, or all of a sudden they would they would start ordering desserts. You could tell when it was kind of the fluctuation of kind of um, like like SNAP benefits, or you can see like the cycle of when people get paid. You could tell like around the middle of the month and the end of the month, people were more willing to buy desserts, right? Those sort of things fluctuate. And food trucks and food in general are this industry that is very it's very business cycle dependent. My son is popping. You can see him a little bit. Hey, I'm on a webinar with amazing teachers right now, so you got to go. It is nearly bedtime for them here. So $10, yes, and tips fluctuate absolutely. So it kind of it has a lot of effects. So $10 if you got this correct. Okay. If there's a recession, your food truck must act quickly to stay in business. So I want you to think, what could you do? Again, these are not things that you can do 10 minutes from now, or excuse me, like a year from now, 2 years from now. We need to do something immediately. There's a recession right now. So I need you to list 3 ways. You don't have to quite list 3, just give 1 or 2 ways to help your food truck handle the recession. Note they must be realistic, and it's something you can do immediately. And that's something that's really important for your students. It has to be able to be done now. So think about what you would do, and then I'm gonna call for unmuters to share out what they would do. Anyone want to share an idea that they have? See some good ideas in the chat. You can even share one in the chat. You don't have to come up with something new.
I went with the smaller portion people who were also saying that. So I said at my burger truck, we were going to have a slider special.
So sliders. So would you charge the same amount, but you'd do sliders?
I would assume that I would charge less and also just to make sure that I still had profit, but that way it would appear like it was a saving to the customers, but it would also cost me less to make.
Okay. What else would you all do?
I will try to be a price discriminating. I will have seniors because they have actually a pension. So, you know, they don't depend on that. They give them like a special, whatever, lunch, whatever, and hours when working people are not able to come for lunch. And then for lunch, do something with either smaller portion or cheaper ingredients, right? Something that will focus more on inferior goods for, you know, working people. For
Well, I have a question.
lunchtime, you know, like 12 to 1.
Yeah, I have a question. How would you, or, and anyone can chime in and help. How would you target the senior citizens? So you're saying that they're not as dependent on the reset, or they're not dependent on, or their money is not as business cycle dependent. What would you do as a business to target them?
I would move my truck, first of all, and I could definitely, if I was targeting seniors, I would move to near either a senior center if it's a walking community, or a facility that might have assisted living, but you know, where people are a little bit more mobile.
Ah, you know, that's an interesting idea. I don't normally see food trucks there, but maybe that's what they need to do. And I've seen these other ones, early birds. So go there early, get everyone to eat dinner, and then go someplace else for, you know, everybody else for late night, you know, like double dip on the dinner slot. Interesting. What else would y'all do?
Find out when senior have bingo night and and bring the truck there because that's senior citizens there.
I mean, like those are some interesting strategies. There's a brewery that they have food trucks every week. They have a different food truck, and it's like a great business. So if there's food trucks that you kind of have like this cult following, you're like, I want to find out where it is. It happens to be parked here. So it's very interesting to be able to do that with social media. Besides targeting senior citizens who apparently have all the money, what else would you do for, or what do you think your students would say? What would they suggest, or what other things would you suggest? What would you suggest?
I think getting them to cut hours or some of those like changing the portion size is just good ideas to just talk about business costs overall. So just how do you adapt? Again, also, do you want to, are you working in the short term hoping the recession doesn't stick around forever? Or are you hoping that, things will, so you can get back to normal business operations or back to your menu?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's lots of different suggestions. So here's a couple of my suggestions. These are not the end all be all. And you'd have this conversation in your class where you're going through them. You will probably have some ridiculous answers. And do not be afraid to say no, that's not going to work. That doesn't work, right? Not all business ideas are gonna work, right? And that's kind of okay. So utilize your mobility, right? You move or park the truck in places that are still heavy with foot traffic. Some of you suggest that going to the bingo nights, the senior citizens parking area, things like that, or places where there's been less unemployment, right? Some recessions are much more cyclical or affecting targeted areas. Offer additional services such as catering. So that might be an option, right? You kind of expand what you do, decrease costs, maybe you cut unnecessary expenses. Maybe you're more careful about where you're driving because fuel is very expensive, right? Those sort of things. Adapt your menu to lower cost options or alternative products. I think some of you had some good suggestions on that. Add a delivery service by bike, so you have like a little bike rack on the back of your food truck. That might be an option. Re-examine your supply chain to see if there's extra costs there or lower alternatives. So, $5 for every realistic answer. Should we do a profit? How are we doing on profit? Elena, have you come out of the hole? I see 85. I think that's the highest I'm seeing. So 95. Wow. Some of you have been dealt a rough hand though. So it's not all just supply and demand graph. Oh, I did that. I crossed through. The tactics that you utilized in the previous activity were successful. And also the economy is improving. People are getting back to work. So use supply and demand graph to show what has happened to your business after utilizing some of the successful ideas from your last activity. So this is probably the only one that's fairly connected to the last activity, but you can easily edit this if you, for whatever reason, didn't use activity 6. You can just say, the recession's doing really good. Your business has been booming. Your social media has been booming. You could make up a kind of a new scenario to go with this. So use supply and demand to show what has happened. When I was writing this, I sent it to a colleague of mine, and he one of his comments was, "I love how many times you make students draw a supply and demand graph." And I don't know how you all feel with that, but I think my students always need practice drawing the supply and demand graph. And in my class, so I teach at a university, we have multiple choice questions. So I tell my students that you're never going to have to actually show that you can draw a supply and demand graph, but you're going to be able to answer questions on your multiple choice questions because of a supply and demand graph, right? So when in doubt, graph it out. I know I probably didn't make that up, but I like that. So when in doubt, graph it out. Yes. All right. So I need to change that edit. I gave it away with these arrows. People are going back to work. They'll have more disposable income and will likely start eating out more again. This will be an increase in demand, right? Restaurants are very cyclical. They feel these sort of things. They fluctuate with the economy. Kind of what we were talking about is that people will start eating out. We are in tax rebate season, and people will go out to eat more often. They will get appetizers, they'll get desserts, they will go to food trucks, right? They will go and do those sort of things. So demand will start to increase as a whole in the economy or for food trucks. I've been moving through this, but any questions? Always stop me if there's any questions. If you have other good scenarios, this is easy to add to. I'd be happy to add. I don't know what I'm at, but I'd be happy to add that. So stop. You have noticed that you can no longer run the truck with your current team. You need more people. So you need to roll the dice to see how many employees you're going to hire. So this one, I should have made you pick a number before you do this. So just work on it, but normally you'd roll a dice, so some people would get 1, some people would get 6, right? It doesn't quite matter for this activity. But here's what I think is kind of fun, is that what you have to do is you now have to figure out, what are these people going to do? So I make the students, you need to consider making some strategic changes to your business. So you need to list yourselves. So I would put my name down. I would put my 1 or 2 friends that are sitting next to me and we're working on this food truck. And then I would have employees 1, 2, 3, or however many I rolled the dice. And you need to give them all jobs. So some might need to be cooks in the food truck, while others might need to handle marketing or other business operations. So what are you going to do? And Richard goes, the food truck is crowded. Yep, it might be a little crowded, which might not be good. So maybe you need to assign those people something else. If you rolled a 6, not all 6 people probably should be in the food truck. Maybe you need somebody to be the bike messenger person in there, right? Diminishing marginal utility. Yeah, absolutely. But so you need to talk about what they're going to do. So throw out some jobs. We're not going to kind of do this. Throw out some jobs that you need to have in a food truck, or some jobs that you're thinking.
How about delivery?
A delivery person. Yeah, so somebody is going to specialize and focus on those. Somebody mentioned like a bike person. That is going to be their role. They are going to take the orders from the food truck wherever we are to like a 2-mile radius. You can order within that, right? You're doing that. What else? Oh, somebody on the corner in a gorilla suit. I love that. The arrow. Yeah. Yeah. You could have like a real live, they're called something, those they're called like wacky wavy guys, like those things that are flapping that are like those blow up tubes that flap around. They're wacky wavy something or other. Maybe you need someone that's a real live that. You have a cashier, you have a social media person. Somebody's got to cook, and maybe you need 2 cooks, right? Maybe you need 2 cooks. Maybe you need somebody that's doing that. Maybe you have somebody that's just doing the cashier and the cook in the back. A cleanup person, prep people. That's really important. I'm going to share with you a podcast, and I'm going to have to find it. I'll take a pause to find it because it's so good. But it's very interesting thinking about how food trucks have insane amount of prep, because it's not like a restaurant where you can just have all this storage, right? So you have to have things ready to go, and you have to do things really quick. If you don't get food out in with about 2 minutes, they say your food truck dies. And so you have to do some very interesting things. The other interesting thing that I found, and it's kind of, once they say it, it's kind of a duh, but food trucks are a lot more costly than I think students know, because unlike a restaurant, food trucks can't buy the food in bulk the same way that a restaurant can. So they can't buy the large quantities. And that's a good way to talk about the lowering average total cost. They can't get to that the lowest average total cost for their long run, because they simply, you have a food truck, you have a really tiny space, right? So some great things there. All right. So hiring more employees will cost your business. If bringing on more people will add to your expenses, explain why a business would increase the number of employees. So I need you to list a couple reasons. Why would you do this? If it's going to add costs, right? You're going to have to pay their salaries. You're going to have to pay taxes on them. You're going to have to pay for their benefits. You're going to have to, they come with a lot of costs in general. Why is this worth it? I'm seeing some time off for the owner. Yes, that's a good one. To keep up with demand, right? Increased sales, faster productivity, meeting customer expectations, right? Maybe in the beginning you could just do it yourself, but all of a sudden now you cannot keep up with demand while you're taking their orders, running their cards, fulfilling their orders, handing it out to them, cleaning it up, right? I'm seeing a good one, MR equals MC. So maybe the marginal benefit is greater than or equal to the marginal cost, right? Those sort of things. So here are just a couple answers or a few answers. You'd give $5 for any realistic answer, teacher's choice. More employers will allow for people to specialize in tasks so that we haven't talked about comparative advantage today, but in theory, you've talked about comparative specialization and comparative advantage in a previous lesson. There's an increase in the demand for your product and you just need more people. Maybe you need a second truck, right? Maybe you are almost like franchising your truck. The additional people will bring in more revenue, right? You can produce more. Hiring more people will grow, so your business might be able to get there's another food truck, or that bike delivery, right? More people ask for more diverse skills. So you can expand your business. Maybe you don't have to spend all that time doing bookkeeping, right? That kind of ties into your specialization in trade, but I think it offers it a little bit different. So some ideas, not all of them. Oh no. War has broken out in Europe. One of the world's largest producers of oils has attacked a neighboring country. I did want to try to keep this as like long term and like long as possible, but so you can obviously see some scenarios that are similar, right? Or some realistic scenarios. But many countries around the world instituted trade sanctions against the attacking country. One of those sanctions is restricting importing oil from this country. Besides affecting many humanitarian efforts, this war will also affect the economy worldwide. So use a supply and demand graph to show how the war in Europe and subsequent sanctions against the attacking country has affected the market for oil. So what is happening? Draw your supply and demand graph. So what is happening? What does your supply and demand graph look like? So this has caused a really bad problem with oil. Supply curve shifts to the left. Do something like this, right? So the oil sanctions decrease the global supply of oil. This makes gas much more expensive. So everyone needs to deduct $20 from your business. However, if you got it correct, you get $10. So you can kind of earn some money back right there. Now, we have not gone through this. We will not go through this. And in an entrepreneurship class, I don't imagine this will happen. However, what is this lending itself nicely to talk about in maybe the AP macro world, or maybe even the college? Supply increase. How about some aggregate demand, aggregate supply changes, right? So when we think about this, so supply shocks, this is going to cause some inflation issues, right? We're seeing those sort of things. Again, I would not recommend you doing that at all in this game or whatnot, but this is a great way to talk through it. So oil is one of those weird kind of commodities that touches every single thing in kind of your business world. So as like a silly example, I have only had, this is a real life story, right? I've only had 4 cups of coffee my entire life. I just don't drink coffee. And so I tell my students, I'm like, okay, so you need to help me. How do you make a latte? So help me out. How do you make a latte? I promise this is going somewhere. Nobody knows how to make a latte? Milk? Well, then it's just milk. Espresso? Froth milk. Okay, so it's just milk and espresso, right? So I just go up there and I go like, can I have a latte? And I like hold out my hand. No, they put it in a cup, right? There's a cup. There's a lid, right? The lid is probably plastic, right? Where is that being made from? Probably some oil. Are they going out back to their cow, to Bessie, to get the milk? No, they're probably having that milk shipped in, right? All those sort of things. So oil is one of those interesting things that it affects so many different aspects of it. And then on top of that, this is a food truck. So oil prices, gas prices, right? Diesel, all those sort of things are even more impactful because not only is it affecting every one of your input goods, it's affecting kind of your day-to-day goods too, because you have to drive to and from your places. You you can't get away from that. There's some interesting the podcast I was telling you about, and the one I'll share another one is that there's some very interesting rules about parking, and different cities have very different rules. So you cannot just leave your truck somewhere. You kind of constantly have to be moving it. Otherwise, you can get tickets. And in fact, one of the podcasts I'll show you is that one of the business expenses is ticket fines. They're like, we just get ticket fines on a regular basis, and it's just part of our it's just part of our business. And so I thought that was kind of interesting and funny. So okay, so how does this increase in oil affect your business? So your business, we already talked about driving, so maybe go someplace other than driving, but it's going to affect your business specifically. So whatever you're producing, what is it doing? Supply costs will rise. Somebody's in the red. What's this going to do? How is the increase in oil, the increase in gas? It's going to be more expensive. But what exactly is it going to affect in your business? So like, what is it really going to do? What is it really going to do? Okay, so it's going to be more expensive to drive the truck, higher cost of ingredients. You can't drive to different neighborhoods, right? More expensive, right? Input costs, all those sort of things. So again, you've got that gas fuel to drive your truck. All the food needs machines to plant, harvest, process will have added costs. So everything that's shipped, right? Everything that's there. Anything that's part of your supply chain will be more expensive. Plastic items. So I don't know if anyone talked about that, but your to-go containers are likely heavily dependent on oil, right? And maybe not in the immediate, because maybe you bought a mass quantity of styrofoam or plastic containers that you've left in your basement at home, and you only grab like a pack when you go out. But eventually when you replenish it, it's going to be more expensive, right? So there's lots of different ways that it goes on there, that it affects there. So $5 for every realistic teacher or realistic answer, teacher's choice. Okay, I'm going to click through this. I think you've gotten this, but use a supply and demand graph to show how this affects your business. So we just talked about it. You've mentioned it, right? And everything is much more expensive. So you're going to see a decrease in your supply. And everything you produce you're going to have to charge higher prices too there. Just simply having to drive around and bearing those costs are all going to be in there. So this is meant to be a way to think through that for your students. All right. So we have reached the end. This is something that I think is extremely customizable. You could add, and sorry, we reached the end of the game, not the end of the webinar. You still got me for a bit of time. So the idea is that it's customizable, that you could add in your own supply and demand questions that you wanted to ask. Maybe you have a block period, so you want to extend it. Maybe you didn't like an activity, you can kind of customize it there. So what is your profit? Who made the most money? 95. I'm seeing 135. 100, 110, 95, 55. That's not bad. 95. Did anyone go negative the whole time? Alina, did you ever make it out? Those darn
I s-
waffles.
I stopped counting when I did go negative. I was too sad.
She's
I do not have a
waffles
number
are
to report.
waffles are ruined forever. Did anyone go negative?
I'm exiting the market.
I love that. Include tips. Yeah. Did we do any tips? Oh, Cheryl, negative 15. All right. So you would have award a prize for your students. When I played this with some high school students, they got quite invested in this and were very angry. There was a lot of audible groans and cheers when they got certain things. So whenever you cheer a supply and demand graph, like I think like an angel gets its wings, and like my heart just soars whenever you cheer that, right? It's just like, oh, so great. So what do you think? How does supply and demand affect entrepreneurs? So you can unmute yourself, write it in the chat. How important is this, or what do you think entrepreneurs need to know about supply and demand? I'm gonna do the Bueller. Bueller. Many factors. They need to understand economics, absolutely. They need to understand this. They're doomed for failure. I agree. And I think that I normally do this in like in my real life, but I go to my opinion corner. So I'm in my opinion corner, right? I'm not certain that most entrepreneurship classes in general at the high school and college level focus enough on markets and kind of the market dynamics. And it's really important that students understand how these things are happening because it comes at you all the time. And what will happen is I often have conversations. I actually one of my dear friends, he actually makes heavenly waffles. So Elena, that's hilarious that you don't like waffles. And they are our birthday dinner waffle. If you haven't looked, Heavenly Waffles is great. He is not sponsoring this, although maybe he should. But I've had him come talk to teachers, and his story is kind of harrowing. Brent, you've had them?
Yeah, I'm from Lincoln, so it's maybe on the
Oh,
West Coast
okay.
side.
Yeah,
They're
I
they're really good.
yeah, but I've had him come to talk to teachers, and he talks about how these things are. And so he figures out how supply and demand works, and he figures out all these things, and entrepreneurs do. But I think that they find it out through the school of hard knocks, and they have to lose a lot of profits, or they have to figure this out kind of the hard way. Whereas if we trained them or we taught them a bit more about supply and demand and the markets and how to react to these sort of things, I think that they could be more they could be more kind of on the offense than always having to be reactive. Again, this is a good point. Politics and policy also impact your business, right? And that's important that you're understanding that. I will admit I'm a bad economist. I did not look at the FOMC outcome today, but those sort of things, they do affect your business, right? It affects whether you can take out a loan. It affects your loan repayment. It affects interest rates, all those sort of things, right? We kind of talked about this. How can entrepreneurs use the tools of supply and demand? Rate stayed put. I'm not going to say I knew it, but that was my guess. I I was just at a really great economic education conference, and we heard from the Federal Reserve president of Philadelphia, and he was very interesting hearing. He was like, we cannot predict what's going to happen. We just have to take what happens to us and react that way. And so it was very interesting learning a little bit more about how they make decisions. And I kept hearing like Hamilton, like in the room where it happened. And that's all I wanted to be in the room where all these decisions, I just want to hear. I don't want to make them. I just want to listen. But so entrepreneurs need to understand what's going on. They need to use the tools of supply and demand. They're going to be hit by this if they don't understand it. We talked through this. What parts of the game were within your control? Did you have some control in this game? Some parts, whether you got your supply and demand graphs, correct? Some choices. Yeah, right answers mattered, right? So you do get to make some decisions that can affect your profits. Does that seem realistic for an entrepreneur? Do they have parts of their game, parts of their business that is within their control? Absolutely. Were there parts that you did not have control over? Yeah, right. We rolled the dice. Had a war breakout. We had a sugar issue. We had a romaine lettuce, salmonella, right? Recession, tariffs, all those sort of things. And you didn't have control over that. Does that happen? Does an entrepreneur have those situations too, where they don't have those? They don't have those. They just have to take what's given and they have to react to it. But hopefully there was kind of a nice mixture of control versus kind of a little bit of out of control. And then entrepreneurial spirit on, okay, so this recession happened, so what do I do now? Right? I need to hire these people. What do I do with them? And I think that kind of mimics in a stylized way some entrepreneurial decisions. Right? Again, there's things that they have control over, no control over, and so on and so forth. Before I show you, I'm going to show you the handout, and then I'm going to show you kind of the whole curriculum as a whole. Are there any questions? Don't forget Sugargate, of course. Dun, dun, dun. Any questions, comments before I move on?
Do you always do this as a whole group instruction, or have you ever done it like in flexible learning where kids are working at their own pace?
You all are the third group to ever see this. So the first group was a group of students, and Brent, you're going to love this, in Cedar Bluffs, Nebraska. It is a metropolis of, I think, like 120 people. Very large area. And then Shane says, assuming it takes more time with younger and less experience, I did it with those students. They only had a 45 minutes period, and I got through all but one activity with them. So it moves quickly. It's not meant to be a lesson where they have no supply and demand graph, right? This is meant to be, you've taught them supply and demand, you've taught them some determinants of demand. This is now the application of supply and demand in the entrepreneurial spirit. So I think it still would take about 60 minutes. The second group, I just did this in Philadelphia with a bunch of econ educators, so a bunch of me's running around, but you all are the first teachers to see this. So it's amazing. So when you say, what do you think, or what have you done this? The answer is no. So not flexible learning, but I think that it could be customizable, editable. I'm also happy to if you want to brainstorm ways to make this fit your teaching style or what's going on, I'm happy to chat with you about that. That's you have my email, jfwagner@unomaha.edu. I could put that in the chat too. Yeah, other questions or comments? Ooh, Melissa, I love the idea of desk size whiteboards. Absolutely. Ooh, they have to run up to the classroom to show their answers. I love it. Anytime you can make students run around and get really chaotic, that's what I love. The whiteboards are really great. So I will say, I'm going to, all right. Can you see my Google Doc now? Okay. Just want to make sure I was sharing my screen and not that window, because there is, that fun thing. So here would be the log. So it'd be like you'd have students write in activity 1, or they could write it in however they want, the gains, the losses, the total profit. Or you can do it with the taking and the giving of money. I think it depends on how big your class is. I think it depends on a lot of things, but I think that's great. Like that, the more fun, the more I love it. I'm all about it. I'd be tempted to do an activity or 2 a day and spread it out over a few weeks. I love that too. And then you can add extensions to each kind of activity. Maybe they have a bell work assignment that they have to figure out, or they have to do a couple things. They have some assignments that go with it. There is an assessment piece on this where they have to listen to a podcast, a Planet Money podcast, which is really great. And then the handout essentially walks through each activity, activity by activity. So they would have to write down what number did they roll. And that would help. You know how we were kind of clicking back and forth on what happened to competition? They would actually have to write it down so they don't have to remember it. So it's all there. Then there's this fun food truck that they have to name it and color it and come up with the items. So this is kind of meant to be they're almost like a business plan, but like a supply and demand business plan. And so on each activity where a supply and demand graph is needed, I have the beginnings of a supply and demand graph. So there's one here. I will say that it on some areas it might be easy for them to move ahead, but in other areas it wouldn't, right? So I'm trying to find one right here. They can't move ahead unless they know what actually happened to the change in competition right here. So maybe they could answer the supply and demand graph about salmonella before, but in general, it's meant to move with them. Questions, comments, concerns? And this Google Doc is editable. Not edible, since we're talking about food trucks, editable. So just make a copy of it and things like that. So here is kind of the curriculum outline. It's coming this summer, hopefully. I don't know the exact dates or what's going on, but it's meant to be kind of a semester-long look at entrepreneurship with an economic lens. And so you're going to see a lot of similar concepts of economics, but everything's going to tie back to businesses. So the examples are meant to be business focused. Economic concepts. Lesson 2, I think, is really fun because they're going to do all these bursts of mini activities. So they have to eat Oreos to show diminishing marginal utility. So I make them keep eating Oreos until like they're going to throw up. I don't actually make them throw up, but they eat them and they eat them and they eat them. And then they like do push-ups to show increasing marginal costs. So they're meant to be really simple, small games. Boom, 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 boom. Let's get these economic concepts rolling. Institutions. So these are that global, the global kind of thoughts of, you know, what economic institutions are there to even allow for entrepreneurship? Things like economic freedom, where you're talking about open markets, property rights, rule of law. Excuse me. Because without those sort of things, entrepreneurship doesn't exist, right? There is no entrepreneurship students in Venezuela. There is no entrepreneurship students in North Korea because the institutions don't allow for it to happen. So we have to even talk about what is a country even doing on like a macro side to even allow for this. So it's looking at how free it is. And then there's an activity about destination startups. So they actually have to go look at data like the Economic Freedom Index data. They have to think about, where would I even want to start a business in these different countries? Excuse me, I just have a tickle. The pricing for entrepreneurs, I think, is really fun. Because it's really looking at like, how do prices come about? And I actually make them price things. I make them look at, you know, I make them do some research on cookie companies, and then they have to decide a price, right? They have to do a business plan. There's a creative destruction, understanding comparative advantage, market structures. So this is going to be one of those ideas where we're talking about economic concept, but we're tying it to entrepreneurship. So, and this is ultimately going to look at what is marketing. The only reason you should market is to increase your elasticity, right? To make you more inelastic, essentially. And you only market in an economy, or in a market structure, excuse me, where you'd have a monopolistic competition. You don't market if you are, or you don't market in certain ways if you are a monopoly, right? I don't see OPPD, which is our power district. I don't see them having commercials other than like, you know, if you smell gas, call us, kind of thing. And similarly, like, you don't see farmers marketing their produce, because it just kind of doesn't make sense. So it's all tied into entrepreneurship, business focus for that. Resources, hiring decisions. I think that this is something that's really important because students don't understand, when do I make a decision to hire? Do I just hire willy-nilly? Or how do I do these business decisions? And then looking at international trade, externalities and ethics of an entrepreneur. So how do we make ethical decisions? How do I worry about the externalities, kind of my supply chain, those sort of things? And then I wanted to add a technology and AI activity or lesson, because every student who starts up a business and you ask them how they're going to do this, they go, well, I'll just have AI do it. And that will not work, right? That is not going to work. They are not a substitute. It is a complement, and it's not always a perfect complement, right? Those sort of things. They cannot just do this. And I did want to point out, and Ted wrote it in the meeting chat too. You can sign up for the program. Please come hang out with me in Chicago. I will be there. I will be there in Chicago, myself and Debbie Henney, who is one of the greatest FTE professors, teachers, I think, in the whole program. But you can hang out with me in Chicago, and I'd love to see you there. And you will see essentially the majority of the curriculum. I mean, it's a lot. You will see a ton of this, and you'll be actively participating in hands-on doing these activities. So with that, I have about 10 minutes that I would like to just open. On Saturday, yep. Debbie Henney said the cost of the hotel is covered. Yes, the cost of the hotel is covered. You basically just have to get yourself to Chicago and get yourself to the hotel. Does Debbie Davis is here. And you get a $600 stipend. So you get a $600 stipend there. Which is like your shopping budget, right? There. 2 nights of the hotel are covered, absolutely, stipend. And then there is a commuter stipend, and that's for people that live near, that are kind of going back and forth. They don't need the hotel. They're going to get funding a little bit different. Any other questions that I didn't answer about the program? Food is covered. Oh, FTE will feed you. They'll feed you. Oh, yeah, Lisa, you probably might need to check on that one. Is it breakfast and lunch, or is it all of them?
Not all of the meals, but it's most meals.
Most.
Yes. I don't know the specific ones off the top of my head, but I think there's like a few nights where, you know, you might need to pay for your own dinner or maybe your own lunch or something. But
We'll go find a food truck.
You're in Chicago. You're not going to want to eat catered food at a hotel. You're going to want to go out and have some really good pizza. I mean,
Or go find a food truck, right, everyone?
or find a food truck.
Most meals are covered.
And most importantly, you'll be there with me to have some good econ fun. And Debbie.
I think I read that the stipend is higher now.
I have no idea the change in the stipend, but
Not for this program. It's $600 for this program. If you go to one of our economics for teachers programs, which are typically long, those stipends are higher. Yes.
So
and
this
if you've never done that program, it's amazing. You should totally do it.
I agree, Erin. That's a great, yeah, absolutely. So this is like it's half of Friday, all of Saturday, half of Sunday. So it's not, you know, it's not quite as long as the econ for teachers. Oh, Elena, you're gonna have fun in Boston. Any other questions?
I think this is a great segue for me to share my slides because I do need to cover a few things with the last few minutes that we have. I just want to share with you all first the Google Drive with the slides that Jamie shared, and the handout too that you can make a copy of. Let's see.
I'm gonna change that typo. What slide was that on? It's the foot truck somewhere.
Oh yeah. Okay. So
yeah, it was scenario 5. I don't remember. It was towards the end.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we've kind of talked about some of our upcoming programs already, but we do have some more virtual programs coming up. We have another workshop on April 30th, which is in a month from now. And if you loved this entrepreneurship topic, we do have another one that's on April 19th. This is going to be a virtual one day, so it's a little bit longer, a little over 5 hours, but you do get a $100 stipend for attending that one. And Jamie, you're also teaching that one, right, with Debbie Henney? Then yeah, so you get to learn more about this topic if you really loved it. And again, like we've been talking about, we do have our summer teacher programs with some of our residential ones, like across like Napa, Chicago, Dallas, Burlington, Vermont. And then we have our economics for teachers programs. These offer a $1,000 stipend. And as mentioned, we do cover lodging during these programs and most meals as well. And you can go to our website to learn more about the specifics. And with that, we're going to leave some time to do the evaluation. If this is your first time doing an FTE program, then first of all, glad you joined us. Second, these evaluations are important to do because that's how I send you your stipend. So if you don't do this evaluation, you will not get your stipend. So I really recommend you doing it right now, you know, with the 5 minutes that you have. Just like open it, do it now, and then once you do that, I will send you your stipend within a week. I will also send a certificate of completion, and on probably tomorrow, I will send another, you know, follow-up email with all of the links that have been sent today and the evaluation as well, if you are unable to do it right now.
And I would just add to the stipend, or I'm sorry, to the surveys. We use those surveys to fundraise. And that's how we're able to actually get the monies to do these programs, to provide the stipends, to be able to afford to pay someone like Jamie Wagner to come and create this material for us. So they're really crucial for FTE's continued existence. we need to make sure that funders know that what we're doing is relevant and useful for you, the teachers.
Okay, well, I am done with my spiel. So I think we can end the workshop, Jamie.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all so much for your time on a Wednesday.
Thank you all. See you next time.
Everyone.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.